What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now Plus. I'm Alex, and this video, I want to talk about the Sony-verse, the supervillains of Spider-Man, whatever you freaking call these things. Sony Pictures CEO talked a little bit about it, and look, ultimately, beyond just the quality of these movies, I think the disconnect with this guy and then kind of like the general audience might be a problem here. Now, I am no massive fan of really journalists in general, movie journalists, game journalists. I don't really buy their opinion. I don't really care what they say all that much, and I value movie scores far less than I do gaming scores, which I actually value those pretty lightly as well. I think to a movie like Pirates of the Caribbean 3, which is probably my favorite movie of all time, I think it's sitting with a Rotten Tomatoes score of like a 35 or a 37 or something ridiculous. It doesn't deserve it, by the way. It's aged quite well, but when it comes to these movies, yeah, they get absolutely destroyed, critically, and then also the audience jumps in, and we're gonna read the comments made by this guy, and he blames critics, and that's kind of why I want to do this opening. Like, again, I'm no fan of them, but I also just don't think these movies are all that good, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as this video goes. So he was talking about, obviously Kraven did horrendously bad, maybe not even in terms of quality. People kind of debate where it lands in all of these Sony-verse movies, but in terms of the performance, it was the worst in his entire tenure of CEO. So he came in 2017. It was the worst performing movie since he took over. So let's read a couple of his quotes. So he says, in terms of Madam Web, it was not a bad film, and it did great on Netflix. For some reason, the press decided they didn't want us making these films out of Kraven and Madam Web, and the critics just destroyed them. These are not terrible films. They were destroyed by the critics and the press for some reason. I do think we need to rethink our Marvel movies just because it's snake bitten. If we put another one of these out, it's going to get destroyed no matter how good or bad it is. And is there parts of that are true? Maybe like very, very lightly, but ultimately, I think that disconnect, and I actually saw this in comments too, like, this is the CEO, of Sony Pictures. And look, at the end of the day, these guys in suits, especially that high up, they definitely, I think, look at things, but they look at things through very different lens than when we look at it. And I think when you get that high up and you're green lighting projects and you have to okay a lot of these creative decisions, I feel like you need to be connected to what the general audience is doing, and oftentimes they don't. I think it's very, very rare. So it's not uncommon that this guy probably thinks like this. I assume a lot of people in his position would, but it's honestly kind of sad, and it is a disconnect because yes, did the critics destroy these movies? Yeah, I mean, they got whatever, 15, 20, 25s on Rotten Tomatoes, going to Morbius, going to Kraven, going to, even Venom after really Venom 1. A lot of these movies have been destroyed by critics, but at the end of the day, I think the proof is in the pudding, as they would say, and I really think it comes down to people that watch it. And I guess this kind of goes back to what I think, of critics, where do people make their movie decisions based off of it? Based off like a Rotten Tomatoes score? Maybe sometimes, but I think honestly, like even like a good bad movie, like you can get just carried by talk, by people talking. And when it comes to Madam Web, okay, so why did it do so good on Netflix? Well, I think it was a very memeable movie. I think it was a movie that a lot of like younger people could probably get into. But honestly, okay, even beyond like the memes and like you've seen so much of these things just broken down comedically, online before the movie even got to Netflix. And then when it got to Netflix, people did even more. But to me, it's actually pretty simple. It's like the free factor. Now, look, if you're paying for Netflix, it's not necessarily free, but to get up, to go out of your house, and to go to a theater is a lot of work for a lot of people nowadays, myself included. I really don't go to the theaters unless something really grabs me. I saw Sonic 3. I freaking love Sonic 3, but it does take a lot. I go to see maybe 2 to 4 movies a year over the last 3-4 years. It's just kind of what's happened. And I think general audiences, I kind of feel it's the same way, at least for certain things. Some genres are starting to thrive or have thrived for a bit, like horror, right, is doing well. But, for movies, plural, that are just kind of mediocre. Now, I think Madam Web is a bad movie. I don't think it's the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. I don't think it's the worst creation ever made. I do think it is a legitimately bad movie. I've never seen any of the other ones. I didn't see Kraven. I have no interest, and I'm going to come back to that because that's kind of a problem too. Kraven, Morbius, I never actually saw, if you can believe it. I saw parts, like through internet stuff. And Venom 2 and 3, I've never actually seen. I only saw Venom 1. And Madam Web, I saw it because of Netflix. So I just think it's easier. Yes, you're paying for Netflix, but you're sitting there, you're on your couch, you're watching YouTube through your TV, you pull up Netflix and you watch a bad movie. And yeah, it performs well because people can just kind of consume it at their own rate. They can consume it at home. Movies that do come out digitally should probably do better, in terms of actual number of people that watch it. It should do better than in theaters because it's just easier, I think. I'm not saying it's better, but it's easier for people to consume it. So that's the reason. To me, that is the reason is, well, if you're already paying for Netflix and then this shows up on Netflix, it's kind of notorious for good and bad reasons, right? But it's kind of something like you almost need to see, but you're not going to go out and pay. I don't know about you, and that's another thing, movie theaters, not necessarily Sony Pictures CEO's fault, but when it comes to movie theaters and stuff, movies are expensive. To see Sonic 3 for my family of 3, I think it was like $62 for the tickets to see, and that's a lot of money. It just is. So, if you're paying whatever Netflix is nowadays, you're paying that, it comes to the service, of course it's going to be easier for you to see it there. So again, that is that disconnect. That is, okay, well, in his mind, he's saying, well, the movie was so good that it dominated streaming platforms. I mean, it dominated streaming platforms, maybe, but it didn't do it because it was good. I do not think those two things actually relate, and that's kind of his problem here, right? When he thinks of Kraven, and even the quote, we read out loud, right? Where it's like, that people don't want us to make Madam Webs and Kravens. I think actually in a way that's right, but I don't think he gets it, because I think the one thing audiences and fans have wanted is you're making all of these spin-off Spider-Man stories, with the villains, but I just said it, you're forgetting one person, you're forgetting freaking Spider-Man. And as all of these things have now come out right over the last couple of weeks, we have found out there was never actually like a law, in place against it. We thought maybe, okay, there was a contract thing with Marvel or whatever. No, they could have put Spider-Man in any. They could have put him against Venom in Venom 3. They could have put him in Madam Web. I know he was being born in Madam Web, but they really tried to make you, not think about it, push away that fact. They could have put him in any of the Kraven. Kraven's a pretty popular Spider-Man villain that has some pretty cool stories with Spider-Man. In fact, one of them was just done in Spider-Man 2, the freaking game, in 2023, right? Literally last year, they did a Spider-Man versus Kraven and Venom, but, that was a big part of it. So that, to me, is a huge thing, right? It's not necessarily like, can you make stories on B-tier villains? I guess, but when you're making a movie on Madam Web, you gotta be smart. And if you're gonna make it about her, that's fine. But like, can you have Spider-Man in it? Can there be some sort of conflict there? And ultimately, for all of these films, they chose not to do it. So that, again, is he right? Do people have people turned against them and not wanting them to make these B-tier things, or villain movies, villain origin story movies? Maybe, but I think actually it's probably done in a good way. I think people don't want it for valid reasons, good reasons. And in his mind, he's thinking, I mean, why don't people want us to make films nowadays? And it's, again, to be the head, to be the guy who greenlit, I assume he greenlit all of these movies, right? Maybe not Morbius. Maybe Morbius was kind of a previous regime that kind of just came into play when he was still there. But like all of these Madam Web flops, like these all happen under him, okay? So I don't know. I don't know what else to say other than, yeah, you need to reconsider. The easiest thing would just be to put Spider-Man in, but you gotta care. I mean, I kind of glossed over it. I mean, I actually did a full, I don't know if it was a members only video. I did review Madam Web. It could only be for members. I don't fully remember. The movie's bad. That's enough. Again, I kind of glossed over it. These are not good movies. Even Venom is like a fun kind of, like Venom 1 I think is okay. And it's fun, like it's fine. I don't think Venom 1 is a good movie. And now again, I don't really want to speak to movies I haven't seen, okay? But I mean, like Morbius got freaking crushed and it seems like it's bad. Kraven seems like it's bad. Madam Web is bad. I mean, that's my own personal opinion. Like, I don't know. They have to put more quality. It's not like they can't make good movies. They can. It's just that these movies are not good. So that's another, it's not just like streaming versus, physically at a theater. It's not just, people wanting to versus not wanting to make Spider-Man spin-off villain movies. It's also like, if you make a good movie, sometimes good movies don't get rewarded, just like good games sometimes don't get bought. Like that does definitely happen. But to strike out, that's what they've done. Like besides Venom, and Venom is not making them like $400, $500, $600 million. Like it made profit, but it takes a bit. I mean, those movies kind of peak at $450 million in the box office, but it costs like 150, 200 million. Then you have to do like theaters getting their cut. I mean, those movies made them, I think, a little bit of money, but again, it's not making $500 million for them. And that's their most successful. That's the thing that lasted the longest. That's the thing that made it to a trilogy. That's the thing that is probably the best quality. And it didn't really, you know what I mean? That's freaking Venom, and it made them a little money, but it's not making $1 billion for them. So I don't know. You know, if you're making a Madam Web movie and you're expecting it to make $300, $400, $500 million, well, you better make it cheap, and it needs to be like the greatest thing you've ever seen, because like people just don't really care, especially if you're not going to have Spider-Man. And then if the movie just sucks, I mean, what do you expect to happen? Okay, so that's just my thoughts. I thought I would make this video. I thought that was an interesting quote and interesting like ideology, you know, that this guy has. Just a thought process, I guess. I don't think he's right, and I think that needs to change. Again, like these CEOs, they can't be thinking this stuff and running the freaking picture studio. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on. I hope to see you all on the next one.